This is Studio 809.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Outdoors Hiking Bob podcast. I am your host, Hiking Bob Falcone. You can find me on my website at hikingbob.com, which has links to my social media, my columns of the Pikes Peak Bulletin, and all my other podcasts, my photography website. You can also contact me there with the Contact Bob link. You can sign up for my newsletter, all that stuff. Links to social media, everything at hikingbob.com. Today we're doing a special bonus episode of the podcast because this is kind of a timely thing we want to talk about is Colorado Springs Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Services is in the middle of, or basically the starting part of their citywide, system-wide master plan process that was last done about 11 years ago. And I have with me today Britt Haley, who's the director of PRCS, and we're going to talk about what the master plan process means. Britt, thank you for being on the podcast.
Oh, it's always my pleasure.
I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're super busy. You ran in here from a meeting, and I'm sure you're going to run right out to another meeting when we're done, so I appreciate you taking the time. Before we talk about that, though, just recently, the Trust for Public Land released their report on the benefits of Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Services to the citizens, the visitors, the government, the businesses of Colorado Springs. And I think that these things, well, we're going to talk about in a minute here, the master plan process and this benefits are connected. It seems to me that there's no way these two things can be connected. So can you just touch on what the TPL report said? What are the economic, social, environmental, ecological, health benefits of our park system?
Well, absolutely. I think one of the things that a lot of people don't appreciate necessarily is that even if they're not visiting our parks or using our trails or going to our community centers, all of those properties are out there quietly generating value to our residents and to our visitors. And sometimes it's an economic benefit, and that is the title of the report, which is the economic benefits of parks. However, there are also health benefits. There are city-wide benefits that people need reminding about. And I think it's also a wonderful opportunity to use a third-party Trust for Public Land that is really the expert in this area. They have a group of really people with special expertise in the benefits of parks, and they use data to come up with the information that's in the report. This year was especially important for data-driven results and information, as our mayor has prioritized a couple of things, one of them being making decisions while using data, and the other is economic vitality. So I thought, why don't we update the results that we had from Trust for Public Land last in 2017, knowing that a lot has changed in our city and economically, so that we could have updated information on which to plan and really take advantage of some of the best things in the park system.
A lot has happened in the last 8 years since the last time they did this. So obviously it seemed like an ideal time with master plan also going on to talk about this. One of the things that stuck out to me, and I think you mentioned at a meeting we were both at, was the effect that having a park nearby, near your home, near your neighborhood, in your neighborhood, how that affects property values. And I think a lot of people miss that they take these things for granted, but it actually makes a difference. If you've got a park in your neighborhood, and I'm fortunate, I live in an old neighborhood. I have 2 parks within 5 minutes walking distance of my house, not even driving distance. That I'm fortunate that I have that. But it actually makes a difference when it comes to the property value of your home.
Yes, and this study actually reviewed property value enhancements if you're 500 feet away from a park, a trail, or an open space. It doesn't matter what type it is. But the updated numbers for Colorado Springs are that it enhances our property values in the city by $1.1 billion with
Wow.
a B. And we actually, when we got the preliminary information, had them double and triple check it because it was such a large boost. But if you think about it and you talk to your friends who are real estate professionals, they will tell you that that's absolutely the case, that anytime you're close to those amenities which do attract people to our city, you will see a boost in property values. So even for those people who don't understand a direct recreational value because they don't necessarily go out into our open spaces for hiking or walk their dogs on our trails or play sports in our parks. They're still getting an economic advantage from being close to all of those things.
And I think people will understand that if you have a park in your neighborhood, even if it's a smaller neighborhood park, or if it's I mentioned I have 2 neighborhood parks within 5-minute walking distance of my house, and then I have Palmer Park literally across the road from my house, that those parks are going to be places where there's not pavement, where there's not more rooftops, where there's not going to be congestion, where there's not going to be a lot of things. It breaks up that layer of rooftops we tend to see when we look at any big city, and Colorado Springs by any means is a big city now, that they break that up a little bit, and they provide like an oasis for that. So it would seem to be obvious, but I guess, it's kind of escaped a lot of people's attention that that's a really big economic boom to your neighborhood.
Well, I love the use of the word oasis. And 2 of the things that this study looked at, in addition to the dollars that are driven from tourism and recreational use and all of those things, is that these spaces actually clean the air. They provide filtration for stormwater. And so even these properties are all working hard for the benefit of all of our citizens by producing what they call co-benefits of open spaces and parks and trails. So everyone is enjoying cleaner air and better stormwater runoff and all of the things that come with having these oases of beautiful spaces. And the fun thing is, too, that wildlife still gets to enjoy what it's always enjoyed in those spaces. And so the more we can connect them and more we make them available, just all the better for the city.
Yeah, an open or a park or an open space is a place that absorbs water instead of it running more into the storm sewers or down the street or into your basement if your landscaping isn't quite right. All of that stuff is beneficial. And of course, they mentioned here the carbon dioxide exchange that happens when you have green spaces and trees and all of that kind of stuff. And that goes back to General Palmer when, if you look at the pictures of when Colorado Springs was founded, there was no trees here, but he made a point of planting all these trees and creating parks. And this goes back to his vision, all these benefits back to his vision of Colorado Springs when he founded it.
It proves how truly visionary he was. But then seeing this report explain all the ways that it benefits all of our folks that use the parks or don't even use the parks. And I think that is one of the nicest things in the city of Colorado Springs, is that we are a city that was founded on the principle that having parks and trails and these places for people to get their quiet, peaceful time, that was something that carries forward into the future and will always be important to us, and it makes us unique. So this report helps highlight some of the data around that so that we can educate folks that aren't necessarily ultra users like the last report identified, but still know in the back of their mind that there's more to it than just the recreational fun of parks.
There has to be a subliminal advantage or a benefit to people, even if, like you say, there's people who don't use the parks, that are not hikers, they're not cyclists. There still has to be this subliminal back of your mind, like you said, advantage that even if you're not using that, when you look out your window and you're driving down the street or you're walking down the sidewalk, there's still this green space that's there, and it has to have some kind of positive subliminal effect on you at some point.
Yes, I'm sure that's true. And another interesting point from the report was that the Trust for Public Land did do a survey in order to supplement its data, and it found out that over 90% of adults had used a park, trail, open space in the past year here in the city of Colorado Springs. So if you think about all the families with kids playing sports all across the city and all of the seniors who are doing different things across our open spaces and in our community centers and on our trails with people both commuting but riding for fun or walking for fun with the dogs and the kids, it's not surprising then to find out that over 90% of them have been out on them.
So even if the percentage of people who don't use the parks is probably a pretty small percentage.
It sounds pretty small.
But they're still getting the advantage of it psychologically, health-wise, economically, everything still. These parks matter to everybody, whether they use them or not.
And my idea is that it never hurts to have a reminder periodically of what all of those benefits are, particularly in the realm of economic vitality, because we do know that our city draws people back to it because it is so beautiful with the parks, trails, and open spaces. But being able to quantify that in health benefits, recreational benefits, outdoor use really does, I think, bear reminding from time to time.
We'll include a link to the report in the show notes for this, and it's been in my my newsletter too. So if people get my newsletters can see that there's been a link to this report. Really exhaustive report, but condensed really well. I mean, they make it so it's easy to read, and a lot of footnotes at the end. But there's a lot of good information there in a really condensed form. It's really easy to read. But economic, in any way you can think of, having this park system is a benefit to the city. It's obviously that this is the thing that people love about the city and what makes the city special. So let's move on. With the beginning stages of the master plan process, we've had a couple of public meetings, or public meetings may not be public open houses. There's a survey period going on right now. I think that goes to August 3rd. August 3rd. So there's going to be a link to that. There's going to be a link to the website at the city, and there's going to be a link to the survey. So take the survey. What is the idea that the last one was done back in 2014? I remember participating in that. What is the purpose of doing a master plan? We did one 11 years ago. Is it just the city's grown so much, or is it just something that periodically needs to be redone? Let's start off with what's the purpose of it?
Well, I would say the foundation for any park system master plan is to understand what the community values and what we should be doing with this incredibly diverse system in a very impressively large city. So back in 2014, just think about what your life was like and what you were doing. Has that changed? Well, of course it has for just about everyone. And right in the middle of that time period was, of course, the pandemic with 2020. And many people, if they weren't big park users earlier, they certainly learned that those were spaces where they could really take advantage of some opportunities that maybe they didn't in the past, and get out and discover some new places. In the meantime, our city has also grown pretty substantially. The U.S. Census now counts us as a city that's over 500,000 people. And so we see that there is a lot that's always moving and changing. And the Parks Department here in the city of Colorado Springs really values understanding what the community desires in its park system. We take this park system master plan and really point to its recommendations for all of the actions that we take forward. Should we purchase more open space to make a ring around the city so that each resident has one close to them and doesn't have to travel very far? What about our neighborhood parks? What about the different activities that people want to do all across our system? And linking trails and understanding across our city where those values are. This particular effort, we're also going to focus in on the different council districts, because we understand that different parts of our city have different focal points for what people value and want to do. So it's not one size fits all across the city. So that's why it's really important to us to get an update every 10 to 15 years. And if you think about it in your own life, it's a lot like financial planning. You need a comprehensive approach so that you know how you're going to be doing. But that approach might need to change every 5 to 10 years just to make sure that you're on track. For us, we kind of take that one step further and saying, what does the community now value? Where does the community want us to focus? And then we take ourselves forward based on that more recent information rather than relying on some information that may be stale.
And the 2014 master plan, besides coming in and then COVID hitting and changing things a lot, was right on the end of the last recession. So there was a challenge we were trying to fix coming out of the recession, and then a challenge we didn't see coming while the current master plan was in effect. So I think that it seems like the master plan is doing two things. It's kind of being reactionary to recovering out of the COVID period and then trying to plan ahead and kind of foresee what's coming next, which who knows what could be. I mean, it could be anything coming next. Hopefully nothing dramatic. With the public input, I guess let me ask you this. What is the goal of the public input? And part two of that question will be, what other public input sessions or solicitation will you be doing moving forward?
Well, I think the goal of the public input is twofold, one of which is to understand across a vast inventory of properties. Sometimes I think our users don't fully appreciate how much variety we have across our system. We have everything from the Pioneers Museum to cemeteries to golf courses, parks and trails, community centers, sports programs, sports fields, soccer. We have a lot to cover, and we also have limited resources. And the last time we did a park system master plan, a big focal point was, how are we to use the funding that is available to take care of all of this, and what more can we do to support all of these systems? And like 2014, this particular go-around will also focus on where are there additional funding sources to be able to appropriately take care of the responsibilities that we have with such a large system. Consistent across those across that planning work is that back in 2014, our community said that their priority was that we should be taking care of what we have. And very consistent with that so far, what we're hearing from people now is they still want us to do that, and that's a very responsible approach. So that helps us focus on, instead of necessarily building brand new things that add to the list of things that we need to take care of, why don't we make sure that we have a strategy to take care of the system responsibly first, because we have amazing resources and they do need upkeep in order to be available for future generations.
One of my neighborhood parks is exactly that. It's one of the neighborhood parks with a swimming pool that's been closed for a number of years. And for nobody's fault, except it sits over some unstable ground, and the pool sinks, and it's been fixed a couple of times, and I think it's gotten to the point where we can't do anything with it. But in the meantime, it's been closed, and I know you and I have talked about what can we do with this thing, and how can we fix it. And it's are you hearing? And we're very preliminary in this, so I want to make that very clear. We're very early in this process. Are you hearing from people to maybe slow down on new development, and I could see that's going to vary a lot from one council district to another. The Southwest, the Southeast is probably saying, no, we need more. But are you hearing very preliminarily slow down on purchasing and maybe let's just fix things up a little bit?
It's probably too early to take too much out of the survey results that we have so far, especially since it's open. And here's my pitch to go ahead and fill out the survey if you think that you've got something that could help us make these decisions. But one of the things that we are seeing early on in the survey results is passive use is more prevalent than heavy recreational use. And so people who like to go walking and hiking are definitely more represented in the survey. And those passive uses have a lot of value to the system. And sometimes I think those are the quiet voices that need to be heard. And so I'm glad for those survey results. I think another thing that helps us is to be able to turn back to this information and remind people when they're pressing us for more and more and more that we do need to take care of the things that we already have. And there was public support for doing that. And then also an educational opportunity to show what it takes in order to do that. I would rather provide a system that has good maintenance and good care of the incredible resources we have than to overstretch ourselves trying to provide more, but at a low level that's not quality. So somewhere in there, we will find the right balance, and that's where the public helps us by telling us we would rather have passive recreation. We would rather have open space, which doesn't cost as much to maintain, than a gigantic rec center like some cities have that is enormously expensive to not only maintain but staff. And so we will find all of those informational points out as we go through this process. And I'm looking forward to seeing what the community says.
And I want to just stress, we're very early in this, so please, if you haven't done the survey, do the survey and keep participating. There's a lot more coming. That don't just take this and decide that, we're done. No, that there's a lot going. You need to be heard. People need to be heard on this because I know they take this to heart. You mentioned that this time around you're looking council district to council district, which wasn't necessarily done in 2014. Will that also set the tone for moving forward? Will based on that results or whatever you get from these different districts, will that change or determine the path of how these different council districts may be dealt with as the master plan moves forward once it's adopted? Where do you see that going when you get this feedback from the different council districts?
Well, from my experience with design and development of different park spaces across our city, one size doesn't fit all, and so you really can't treat it that way. What we know is that in the southeast, there is plenty of park land developed into parks, but the parks aren't in the best of shape. And so some of the feedback that we get on those parks is, could we have just the parks more developed and in better maintained? And people are super thrilled with Panorama Park. We actually, at Arbor Day this year, got to plant over 23 trees in Prairie Grass Park. And so listening to what residents in the Southeast want is more shade and more safety and security and the spaces that they already have to be taken care of well. But when you get up into the Northeast part of the city, then we're hearing more from citizens who say, I would like to have a park closer to my house. We don't have enough park space itself. So I think taking a finer look at what is needed. Dog parks are highly, highly popular across the 2014 Park System Master Plan. But when you dive down into certain areas in our city, having a dog is not necessarily the number one need for them, or a dog park. And so understanding that we can have different spaces that respond to different requests, I think is really helpful.
The Southeast, as we know, I don't want to, every district has got its own challenges. Mine's right in the middle of town, so it has its own little challenges, but I'm very fortunate. Where there hasn't been traditionally a lot of opportunity for open space development there, because obviously the land that was available was on the west side of town because a lot of it was undevelopable, so it would end up falling into our hands in one way or another. But the recent purchase of the Wild Horse Ranch part there is going to give them 1,000 acres of open space. Do you hear from the southeast part of town that that's also what they want, or do they like the idea of the open space? I mean, we all like it. If nothing else, it creates, like you said, a kind of a ring around the city. We're building this buffer around the city. Are they also looking for that too, or they still want, like you said, let's fix up these parks that we already have?
Well, it's interesting in the Southeast. I think there were times in the past when there were opportunities for acquisitions of areas that we would be considering closer to the naturalized condition, creek areas and maybe some open space areas, but they're not the same as like the backdrop with the mountain backdrop. They're not the same as Corral Bluffs. And in the past, sometimes the TOPS Working Committee and the Parks Board chose not to pursue acquisitions like that because they didn't have some of the features that you might expect in a regular open space. So I'll be interested to hear this time around what people value the most. One of the challenges for people who live in the southeast part of our city is transportation to open spaces. Many kids grow up in the southeast not having visited Garden of the Gods and some of these parks that are available. So maybe the better focus for the Parks Department might be on programs that can make those more accessible. Fisher's Canyon open space is not very far away in terms of miles, but it is very far away in terms of culture. And so there may be a renewed focus on making those opportunities more available. Certainly in the Southeast, we heard a lot during our park planning processes about safety and security and basketball courts, because those are things that are widely enjoyed and people certainly appreciate. And we've been able to make some strides in those areas. But I also wonder if a third grade class right now was introduced to the wonders of our trail system and our open spaces, and they got a chance to try some of the sports that other people take for granted because they're right out their back door, whether we wouldn't have more folks from the Southeast valuing those things. That's why at Panorama Park, which is 13.5 acres, there's such a wide variety of different things to try. And I see kids and adults alike trying all of it and enjoying it, which tells me that parks are for everyone and that all we need to do is make them more available to everyone, and people will make their selection amongst their favorites. But I think that value is inherent in just human beings.
Cool. The last master plan was done in 2014. Obviously, when a master plan is done, there's a list of things that people want to have happen. How has that list, those goals in that master plan, how much of that has been accomplished or realized to this date? Now we're 11 years later. How much of that has been realized?
We did an analysis of our past plan, and about 77% of the recommendations were either completed or started. Some of these things will always be ongoing. One of the recommendations was to take advantage of water conservation opportunities, and we have done that with conversion of bluegrass to native grasses, over 100 acres since that plan. But water conservation will always be something that we focus on, so it will never be finished, as an example. Another example was to make sure that we got an extension on the Trails Open Space and Parks sales and use tax. And we took a couple of efforts on that, and we did extend it, and the voters extended it, thank you voters, until 2045. And so some of these are discrete things that you can do and you can check off a list, and we've done them. There was a request or a recommendation to align our parkland dedication ordinance with the parks master plan. And so we've done some of those things, and we still need to continue focusing on the ways to have a more sustainable funding approach to our parks, trails, and open spaces. So I expect that some of the recommendations will continue on, and some of them will sort of be obsolete. One example is we had a list of undeveloped parks and other park properties, and we ended up doing some land exchanges on some sports complex properties that were not big enough to give us a sports complex, and those will no longer be on the list. So the list will change because we've got more smaller neighborhood parks now that are coming onto the list for the next one. And so I'm looking forward to the strategies that will see emerge as a basis of having the report that tells us all of the things that need to be done, and recognizing that we did make really good progress on the 2014 plan's recommendations.
And I guess my point of bringing that up, and it's great that's it's a really good percentage. 77% of stuff has either been done or started, and some things will just continue just carrying on, obviously. That the idea is that the citizens, the public, puts their input in. That gets given to you. It's adopted by, I guess, city council has to put their final blessing on it, because obviously they have to pay for everything. So I guess they want to have their final blessing on it. And then that sets the path for your department going forward. So without the public input, my whole goal of this is to get the public involved in this and realize this is their chance to set the direction of this department for the next 10, 12, 14, 15 years going down the road. That in 2014, there was this master plan with a lot of things that had to be done. We're 11 years later. A good chunk of it's been done. So obviously that master plan is kind of outdated. Most of the stuff's been done.
Well, it's funny. I would have never guessed that when people started to say, it's about time to do one. And then we started looking at all the recommendations and realized, well, they're right. They're right about that. And here's the other thing that's great about doing a big public plan like that is the public tells us, we capture it in a plan. There's a big discussion process at the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Services Advisory Board, at the TOPS Working Committee, at all of these public meetings. We take it to City Council where the public can see what we're doing. And then for the next 10 years, we can show the public, do you want to know what it is that we've been asked to do? Here it is in a plan. We're not just doing it willy-nilly. We actually have a reason why we're pursuing X, Y, or Z. So I think it's always good to ground ourselves in that public process, and then also use it to educate people who wonder why we don't do things differently.
Which goes back to me saying the public needs to be an active participant in this, because this is, I can't stress enough, this is the public's opportunity to tell the Parks Department and City Council, this is what we want to have happen over the next 10 or 12 years. And this is the chance. This is the, you don't get a chance like this. Well, you get it every 10 or 12 years. You need to take advantage of it while you can. When we're looking at this, I'm a parks and trails and open space person. Most people are, but you mentioned earlier that this also includes things like golf courses, the Pioneers Museum, that gem of a building downtown. It's world class and such a incredible asset to the city, and sports complexes and community centers. How does this master plan? I mean, it's easy to see how it affects parks and trails because there's things you have to buy and develop. How does it affect amenities like that? How does this master plan process affect amenities like that?
Well, we've tried to focus on a few different approaches this time around, one of which is we have across our system a lot of deferred maintenance. And this is a way to really carefully review with a third party. We've got Kimley Horn, which is an engineering firm, going through all of our facilities and helping us identify and prioritize the needs all across the system, whether it is a park trail that needs to be repaired or it's a community center that needs a new roof. And not only understanding it, but putting ourselves on a schedule. So we do routine maintenance and regular remodeling and upkeep to extend the life of each of these facilities that people rely on. So that's how it goes a little bit beyond sort of the things that are obvious to us is, should you buy more open space or should you not? The other focus that I put into this particular effort is on tourism and our visitor-impacted parks. Unlike your regular municipal park system anywhere in the United States, we have places like Garden of the Gods and Pikes Peak, America's Mountain, and sports complexes that drive a lot of visitation impact. And so just understanding how we can better steward those facilities and resources so that people understand our system a little bit better and appreciate that we have a city park, which is Garden of the Gods. And many places don't have that, but we also have the responsibility and obligation to protect it for all the future generations that will be coming long after you and I are gone.
When you have millions of people visiting it, you have to have some kind of plan on how you deal with the crowds and the impact of the crowds and what they want and what visitors come here expecting to see and what they want to experience. And same thing with Pikes Peak. People go up there and they have expectations, and this is how you plan them. Pikes Peak is a little different in that it's run as an enterprise. So really not much in the way of tax money goes in there. It's mostly self-supporting.
It's almost exclusively self-supporting.
And it has to by law. If it gets too much tax money, then it can't be an enterprise anymore. There's all these little nuances to these things. Things I learned over the years of participating in more in depth. So when it comes time for the master plan, everything's going to come back to people are going to want things, and how do we pay for them? But Pikes Peak is a little different because it's self-supporting. So where does the master plan fit in? Is it mostly just on where its self-supporting dollars are going to go? There's a beautiful new visitor center up there. And so is this more of not so much allocating dollars to Pikes Peak, but how they're going to prioritize how they spend their self-supporting dollars? I guess I'm trying to figure out how that, because that is more of a tourist destination than a local amenity that people here. I mean, everybody here eventually makes their way up to Pikes Peak, but not to the numbers that it's mostly. I imagine mostly tourists that go up there. So how does that master plan affect like someplace like Pikes Peak?
Yeah, I would expect the master plan to focus on the properties that are not enterprise properties. And so we have 2 golf courses, 2 cemeteries in Pikes Peak, America's Mountain, that all operate as their own business units. And certainly a lot of people enjoy those properties, and we encourage everyone to take advantage of those opportunities. Even the cemeteries offer visitation opportunities and history and some fascinating things. What I mean more by focusing on tourism and visitation is those other properties across our system, such as the Skyview Sports Complex and Garden of the Gods and Red Rock Canyon Open Space and Palmer Park, and some of these places that really host a lot of activities that you wouldn't necessarily think of when you think about the Pikes Peak the Pikes Peak Apex mountain bike race that goes up North Cheyenne Canyon and all across our system and in and out and all around. And there's a lot of benefit from not only the local usage, but also the economic benefit of the tourism that comes with it. And I feel like that's been underrepresented across the city of Colorado Springs in terms of the benefit and the economic vitality that brings. So there is a focus in this particular master plan on that information just to get a better handle on it as our city grows and as a lot of people come in to experience the assets in our system. We should also understand both the benefits and the impacts so that when we apply for grant funding to support some of those activities, we've got good data that can help us stretch those dollars further or find new funding streams to provide it.
So based on that, do you want to be also hearing in the survey part of this, do you want to be hearing from the tourists also?
Well, we haven't focused that on the tourists themselves, but if you think about our residents, when you have family come into town, what do you do with your family? Well, sometimes you take them on a driving tour to show them some of these spaces, or you take them to the Labor Day liftoff to see all of the balloon glows, or you take them to see a game that at a park. And so those kinds of things are happening. And when high school sports are happening, sometimes they're happening in our parks, or when you are a pickleball player and your local tournament's happening, it's probably happening at Monument Valley's pickleball courts. Right. And so we definitely do have all of this intertwined visitation between our local and, Colorado people coming to enjoy what we have to offer. So I think focusing on both the benefits but the impacts of that in our park system master plan is a good idea.
Awesome. The TPL report, just to go back to that for just a second, did it, I imagine it touched on the tourism aspect, the visit, that was probably the big economic thing, was the tourists coming in and using our facilities and parks. Was that part of the economic benefit to the city?
Well, there were several prongs to that. One of the things that I was surprised by, but not surprised by, is that the number of visits to our parks was 22,700,000. Wow. Like lots and lots of visits. Now, whether that's people who live here or people who don't live here, that's an amazing number of people enjoying and appreciating what we have. But from the outdoor recreation impacts, there was something like $289 million of value associated with that. And then the Trust for Public Land also calculated the recreational value of just having these things here for our people at over $90 million. So when you think about it, Garden of the Gods is free. There is no admission charge. But other people in other places to get to enjoy something that beautiful, they have to pay an admission price, whether it's a national park or a state park. All of the trail system, when you go, let's say, up to Vail and you get to hike maybe on a ski slope. So all of these things that we provide for free do have a value to people, and so they tried to capture that recreational value. Just having it so close, when you think about being in downtown and you could be 10 minutes later up in North Cheyenne Canyon, that has a special value. Right. So those are some of the things that they looked at. But they also looked at outdoor recreation spending. They looked at tourism, and all of those things make our system what it is.
And going to the local outdoor shop and buying a new pair of hiking boots or a backpack or a water bottle or a map or whatever, all of that, it all just rolls into one big package here.
You come here to play in the Senior Open and you have to buy something for that trip, or the Warrior Games, or any of the Olympic events. People are spending money and they're spending it here, and that's great.
Which all goes back to, again, why we have a master plan, so we can decide collectively as the citizens and as the people who use these places or live here, the direction we want the Parks Department to go in for the next 10 or a dozen years down the road.
Right. And the other thing I wanted to highlight is that the size of our city has actually outgrown the map boundary of the last Park System Master Plan.
Oh my gosh.
And so there's a lot of blank space where things are happening, and we would like some guidance.
Right.
So just even the trail connections about the rings that we want to do around the city, ring the springs. Well, the city's grown beyond that now, so it's time. I
hadn't even thought of that part of it, that we actually have outgrown that original map, but it's been 11 years, so I guess 12 years we have.
A lot has happened.
Yeah, and we've actually outgrown that. Holy cow, I didn't even think of that part of it.
Yeah.
Geez. For me, having been a citizen committee member for the Parks Department and also at the county and at the city, for me, it's the value of the citizens having the chance to be heard in this process. And I remember the last process. There was a lot of citizen involvement, especially coming out of the recession. There was a lot of involvement. People wanted the Parks Department to get back to where it was, and after it had been decimated by that economic downturn, there was a lot of involvement there. When this is said and done, well, first off, let's get an idea of what the timeline is. We're kind of in the beginning stage of this. What's the timeline? When do you expect that that this will be wrapped up, and when do you think that this will be a final document that you can then say, this is what's going to guide this department for the next 10 or 12 years?
We are aiming for early spring of 2026, right around the corner.
Okay.
So the way it started, there was a kickoff, and then there was some initial assessment and research work being done by Kimley Horn all across our system. We have launched the public process. We've had 2 public meetings, one in the north end of the city, one in the south end of the city, and a virtual meeting where we can get guidance from citizens about what they see as deficits in the system, where they see the pressures in the system, and where we also gave them a spending game where they were given a certain amount of money and they could put that money toward buying new things or building new things, remodeling the things that we have and taking care of the things that we have, and just to get not only a sense of where their values lie, but also an understanding that you have to make choices across a system this large and therefore set priorities. And sometimes it feels like on individual projects that you don't get a good sense for the priorities across the city. This is nice because it's not an individual project in front of someone. It is the entire system. And so I just think it causes people to look at the priorities a little bit more scientifically or a little differently. And it's not as an emotional reaction as I do want this very badly right here, or I don't want this thing right here. It looks more at what will our city look like as it grows for the next 10 years across all of the things that we treasure about our park system.
So people are being forced almost to, I don't want to say forced, but they're being nudged, guided, encouraged to think more globally when they're looking at this, as opposed to, I mean, I have my concerns about my neighborhood park, but now that I'm looking at this, I'm thinking more globally on this. What does this benefit the whole city? What does the whole city need? So I see that as being, I think it's an educational benefit for a lot of people too, that they really have to think
big picture.
Yeah. How does this impact the entire city? How does this impact everything else? What additional public engagement will you be having going forward?
So the next thing that will happen is we're going to take the initial survey information, and there's still time to complete that survey. Then there was a statistically valid survey that was mailed out to different homes across the city. That's what's going to produce the specialized information for each council district. So make sure if you get that in the mail that you go ahead and fill it out and turn it back in. All of that information will be taken back into Kimley Horn, and they will produce some draft recommendations based on it and the other work that they're doing. And then a draft will come out for public comment. And again, we'll go through some public meetings and some public process to try to hone in on what the final recommendations will be for the department. And
Excellent.
That will happen this fall.
So the mail thing, does that go to everybody or just select people in different districts? How does that?
That has been selected through a random process of getting input all across the city. What we sometimes find in the Parks Department is we have a lot of representation from people who are very interested in parks, trails, and open spaces, and then also specialized groups that really like a certain thing. But our struggle has always been if you went out into a grocery store anywhere in the city and asked a random person about this information, would they have the same responses? So here we're trying to blend the opportunity for those folks that really want to give us their input to go ahead and go online to our city webpage, and all you have to do is put in Park System Master Plan as one word, and you will get to the page that allows you to take the survey. Anyone who's especially interested can do that. And then the statistically valid survey is going to go out to all kinds of different people who may or may not be as plugged in.
Awesome. And we'll include links to all that stuff in the show notes.
Thank you.
And have them out there. And also I keep every week now I've been putting the survey in my newsletter to keep taking the survey, or not keep taking the survey. Take the survey. If you haven't taken it, take the survey. Britt, I've taken up a lot of your time. I really appreciate it. Do you have any last words for us as far as this master plan process? Anything last you want to tell the people out there about what they can do with this process?
Well, anybody who's listening to Hiking Bob on a podcast should definitely take the survey. It's almost a moral responsibility that you have to do that. And I will share with you an embarrassing fact. And that embarrassing fact is, so far, our responses haven't been as robust even as our e-bike survey. So we've had more responses to the e-bike survey than we did than we've had yet so far on the park system survey. And I think that's a little backwards. So I'm encouraging everyone to step up, respond to the survey, give us your thoughts, because the people that are listening here, you do have information to share, I'm sure of it. So please take part in it, and then stay with us through the process, because as we get that first draft out, you may see things that need enhancement, or you might see things that seem off. Make sure that you're taking part in it, because there are a lot of opinions across this whole work that we do, and we value getting those opinions, and it helps guide us. We can't chase everything in the park system. This helps us prioritize, and I'm grateful that you're willing to do a podcast to help us get the information out, and I'm grateful to anyone who takes part in it to help guide us toward the future.
And Britt, thank you for that. For anybody who's listening, I will tell you that having participated in the 2014 process, that between the first draft and the final draft. There were changes made based on the public input. There was a lot of changes made to that document based on the public's input at meetings. And so you need to be, I can't stress enough that this is your chance to be heard and to set the direction. So, but don't start when the first draft comes out, because a lot of things are already set in motion. You need to, what you do now sets where that first draft goes. And then from there, the final draft. So it is, I can't stress enough, everyone listening to this, just do the survey, sign up for the newsletter that comes out with emails about upcoming engagement, and just be a part of this program, because this is your chance to tell the Parks Department what you want for the next 10 or 12 years. And these opportunities only come up every 10 or 12 years. It's not like they come up all the time. It's an expensive, big process, and you got to get it right. And the only way to get it right is for everybody to participate. So please, please, please be a part of this thing and make your voice heard. Britt, again, thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
As always, super fun to talk with you, Bob.
Always enjoy it. And everybody, thank you for listening to the Outdoors Hiking Bob podcast. Watch for the links in the show notes and participate in this process. We'll talk to you next time.